Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Christine Hart, and today we are going to talk about the stabbings that are going on throughout the UK and very upsetting times. I've just seen a video on Twitter of a young man out walking a baby with a dog and was just approached and stabbed in the neck, and that video is doing the rounds on Twitter. He went towards the attacker, who you can clearly see, and next thing he realized there was so much blood, turned, put his head down, walked away to not incur any more rage from the individual that carried it out, and then promptly died. So I don't even know where this happened. I think it was Birmingham. It was reported, I think, by a little local online blog, and not reported by the mainstream media. I'm very horrified about that. Nobody knows this man's name. Nobody knows if the attacker was caught, probably not. And then just lots of other people. There's another stabbing in Wigan. We have the Southport stabbings. It is just a horror story of all these stabbings. I was reading somebody was talking about something called anarcho-tyranny. Anarcho-tyranny is where the state fails to enforce basic law. So all these stabbings are running around. They're uncontrollable. Even there was a policeman as well. Police was stabbed, again in the neck. I don't know what the relevance is of that. So they fail to enforce basic law. If it's this bad, we need to bring in the army. And then the state impasses excessive control on others. So people that are saying things online, some of these people are very young, some of them have low IQ. Basically, if they're saying anything that is upsetting, they should be educated about that, not merely slapped in prison. The last one was a young man of 17 apparently waving a flag outside a mosque. Shouldn't somebody just speak to him? But no, he's gone to prison for a few years, 2 years, I believe. So the state impresses excessive control on others. That is tyranny. So you've got anarchy and tyranny, but it's the tool of the totalitarian powers. So this is what's going on at the moment. So it's done to dehumanize the human spirit. So I have my guest today, who's an expert on many things spiritual. He's written books about the jinn, etc., etc. He's been a guest before. Welcome to the show, Brian Barrot. And can you please explain why our leaders want dehumanization of our spirits?
Well, it's really simple. It's the old age trick of order from chaos. Quite simply, you bring chaos and then you recommend order. We saw this with the COOF and the state injectable. Essentially, they said you have to have the digital passport, you have to have the state injectable. And essentially, you have to stay at home and you have to stay within your realm of living. Now, realistically, none of this works with any form of disease. If we go back to the Middle Ages, in the plague period, many people died and perished because they were isolated, ironically. And this was found out until the 1950s when they started building old roads through the Yorkshire Moors. They started finding abandoned villages, and essentially these villages were abandoned because of the plague. So, isolation doesn't work, mixing doesn't work. The only thing that seemed to have worked was natural immunity, and this was even in the time of the plague. However, the government isn't about curing you, and it's not about making your life easier. It's just about tyrannical control. And to prove that to yourself, you can say, okay, Brian's some kind of lunatic, but the point being is is that you pay tax not to go to jail. It's that simple. If you don't pay your tax, you go to jail. So really, what is the point?
I mean, a lot of people are comparing us to China, saying we're becoming China. And I believe that, of course, we've got a lot of Chinese genes here. I mean, the Chinese were very bullied. They used to be like us. We look at China now and we say, oh, look how passive they are. They're so bossed about all the time. But, of course, we now have had that persecution. Food has gone up. It's a harsh environment. And so we are becoming, very, very passive. That, we will probably just say after, you can't go out the door without being stabbed, to bring in facial recognition and, digital ID.
Facial recognition is already here, Chris.
Right.
Yeah, it's complete garbage. I mean, for example, I know lots of people who travel, myself included, and you've still got this garbage of showing your passport, getting searched. Round the airports, there are hundreds and hundreds of cameras, and even cameras that you cannot see. And essentially, they know everything about you from the facial recognition. So it's already here. They just don't tell you about it. And this is, it's garbage.
What I want to know is, who are the controllers? Are they a certain race? If they are, by the way, we can't say that. But, I mean, is it a sort of group of people, let's leave out their race or what religion, is it a group of people that have become egocentric and want to get rid of a lot of us? Or is it a satanic thing against God? What do you believe is happening there?
Voltaire summed it up in a very simple sentence. Those who you cannot criticize are those which control you. Now, you cannot criticize the government now. It's impossible to criticize the government. Yeah. Now, in reality, who controls the government? The government does not control itself, because essentially it is controlled by the bank. This has been acknowledged by many ex-prime ministers, Liz Truss being the most famous one, saying that you can sack the prime minister, but you can't sack the chairman of the English bank. So, so the banks rule the politicians, in turn they rule us. Yeah. And now it's got to the stage in England that you can't even sort of criticize the politicians, because essentially they are in control. It's that simple. You would have to.
Why do they hate us?
Because they've always hated us. Have you not read your history? Have you not read your history?
Obviously not. Tell me. Educate me.
Oh, well, think how many revolutions there's been in England. Yeah, you know about the big revolutions like Oliver Cromwell and co, but there's been many middle, sort of revolutions. Even before the Second World War, there was a revolution in Liverpool where Winston Churchill sent the troops in to sort it out. The ruling class have always thought of us as nothing more than cattle. And they treat us like cattle. If you look at the history of America, for example, there are times in the 60s where poisons were sprayed onto populations just to see what happens. So there is some disconnect between those who rule us and ourselves. They just see us as cattle. They see us as expendable. I mean, it's like Gurdjieff said, like Gurdjieff said that war is the inevitability of the human condition of man being asleep. Realistically, if you think about war, you're going to be psychologically damaged, maimed, or killed. Now, if I told you, go through that door, you've got a good chance of being psychologically damaged, maimed, or killed, would you go through the door?
No.
No, but people do that to war, proving that essentially they're asleep. Nobody in
Oh,
their
I
right
see, yeah.
nobody in their right mind would go into this position. Now, essentially, people are asleep. They really are asleep. I mean,
Mm.
if we went back to, I don't know, let's say we went back to the 14th century and somebody stabbed your son, you would have your friends with you and you would slaughter whoever stabbed your son.
Mm.
It's that simple.
100%. Yeah.
It's that simple, yeah? And the authorities would literally stand by and let you do it because essentially they don't need that trouble. But then we go back to the 80s and the Dunblane shooting, and all the pistols were taken off the British. Now, do you really think that the pistols were taken off the British because, some guy in Scotland shoots somebody, or is it there was a much longer plan to oppress the British and turn us into slaves like in China? I'm sorry, but the evidence speaks for itself. England is now China. They're taking people out of jail to put rioters into jail.
What does that say?
They say state oppression. You're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to think. You have to do what you say. And of course, the next thing will be another state injectable that you have to take and you can't speak about it. I mean, people forget that the Prime Minister of England actually said, anybody who speaks out against the injectable, I will imprison. And he said that when he wasn't in power. This is an authoritarian psychopath who doesn't care about you or the people who live there.
So looking at this now, you said we're becoming China. Explain China to me.
Well, China's quite simple. You're given social credit points. So if you say what I've just said about the government, then essentially I will lose all credit points. I will lose my house, I will lose my family, and I will be on the streets. You can't say that in China. Realistically, I don't think you can say it in England now, unless you're in a privileged position. And even that, I doubt now, is safety. I saw this happening in England round about 2000. Essentially, it was to do with certain people's behaviour. I won't say anything, but they were just not arrested. There was no culpability. And if that's the case, then essentially, well, what's the point in being in a country like that? So I left. I left round about 2013 when I understood that this was the situation. So,
So in China, it's already been enforced, and then it's coming here. So do you think, I'm trying to get a close-up version of the elite. Well,
we just said it. Anybody you can't speak about is the elite. So you think about who you can't speak about, and that tells you who's the elite are. Sorry.
Who's the god of the elite?
Well,
can we say that without mincing, without making it too obvious? Who is their god?
Well,
Satan?
Who is their god? Do you really think they're going to tell you?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I've got more than a vague idea, but I'm not going to say because essentially, once again, you can't speak up against those who have the power. I'm just
can you? I mean, without saying who you think they are, because obviously we're not allowed to say anything about any different particular peoples. But if you mention their god, does it reveal them? Or
well, it's. I mean, essentially, you're talking about an entire race. So you whatever you do, whatever you mention, then this race will come into focus, and so I'm not prepared to do that. And
okay, so are we thinking that their god is Yahweh?
Well, you can call it Yahweh, but I call their god a completely different god, and it certainly isn't Yahweh. But although Yahweh is ironically one of his names, and that's all I'm prepared to say, really.
Now, I quite like Yahweh. I mean, I have to personally say that I prayed to Yahweh and got results by using the Psalms. And
Yeah, but
what's your opinion on that?
it's a God. It will work for you, isn't it? But what's the price? What's the payback?
I don't know.
Well, exactly. Whenever you alter the space-time continuum, then there's always going to be a payback. I try to explain how spells and magic works. I'm talking about high magic now. I'm not talking about some middle class men and women dressed in sort of horned anklers dancing around a tree. I'm talking about proper magicians doing proper magic, of which really I probably know maybe 5 in the entire world. Okay, so we're talking serious people. But essentially, when you do real magic, imagine you have a water barrel, yeah, okay, and the water barrel is suspended. To do a spell, you undo the water barrel, the water comes out, then you put the lid back on the water barrel. Well, as soon as you put pull the cork out of the hole or unscrew the tap, water gushes everywhere. You push the tap back, water gushes everywhere while you're sealing the cap. You've got the power that you want, you have the water, but unfortunately you've disturbed everything to get what you want. And essentially that is the same with magic. Magic is directing the Earth's energies, but you can only direct them. You can't say what's going to be the spoils of the movement. Okay? And that's really high magic. And that's why literally people who can do high magic generally don't. Okay? Because essentially you always alter the space-time continuum.
Right, and do you believe that there's certain peoples on Earth right now that are busy doing magic? I do believe that the elite are balls deep in magic.
Well, essentially, you have to look what's happened, and everyone is not talking about the elephant in the room. Okay? And the elephant in the room is Cern.
Right.
Is Cern. Okay?
Explain that to me as if I'm a child.
Right. Okay. The massive CERN Hydra Collider. Yeah, where they are.
And what is a Hydra Collider?
It's where they fire small atomic masses at great speed and crash them together. Okay?
Right.
Now, if you know about quantum entanglement states that there is no past and there is no present and there is no future. For example, if you have a piece of molecule thousands and thousands of miles away, whatever you do to this molecule, which is not thousands and thousands of miles away, affects the molecule which is thousands and thousands of miles away. So everything is connected. The past, the present, history, everything is connected. Now, you putting things into the Hydra Collider and smashing things together, it's going to cause a vortex. Now, I was on the web the other day, and there was a woman discussing that underneath CERN there is a multi-dimensional porthole that has been opened. And this is a scientist saying this. This isn't some kooky magician saying that creatures from a multi-dimension are coming through to our plane of consciousness.
Right.
This is a serious person saying this. I'm not going to mention a name or anything like that, but you can find it on YouTube. Essentially, underneath CERN, there is a portal, and creatures and energies from another dimension is coming through to our realm of consciousness.
Right.
And realistically, if that's the case, the Earth is no longer the Earth.
What do you mean? What is it then?
Well, essentially, it's in a state between two places. If the collider has really opened a portal up, then the Earth is in a dimension that probably nobody knows about. But we're reeling the effects. I mean, this is what they call the Mandela effect. That everything is looking different, and the reason why it's looking different is probably because another alternative universe is sliding into our universe, or has slidden into our universe. So our Earth is not the same on any level, and this is not theoretical garbage. This is, this is empirical. This is scientists saying this. This isn't just kooky magicians who wear kaftans and spend too much time meditating. No, this is
this
is really hard.
Yeah, I've been feeling that ever since we had the coronavirus and because that was global. Everything is happening now. It's not just happening to one country. It's like global, and people are like completely confused. They're not even telling us what is going on, but there's some kind of really big global shift. And I'm watching movies like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Oblivion with Tom Cruise. I mean, it's utterly brilliant. It's when something that we don't know about takes over Earth. And basically he's sitting there with a woman. He thinks it's his girlfriend, but she's part of it. And he kind of wakes up when he encounters these other people. And there's that, and there's also the TV series Oblivion, which again is about this takeover, but we don't see who's done it. So these, I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, but do you believe that these creatures coming through are probably more intelligent than humans?
Well, having spoken to a lot of these creatures, in some aspects, they're highly intelligent, much more intelligent than we are. And in other aspects, they're not. Okay? I can tell you that from personal experience, that when you speak to an entity, there are aspects of it which are super, super intelligent. And then there are other aspects of it which are like, that's really interesting, because I don't see it like that. And essentially, they're just not up to speed on some things, but other things, they leave us for dead, really. So, are they hyper intelligent? Some are. Are some quite stupid? Yes, some are. Is an entity that you talk to highly intelligent and also fairly naive? Yes, they fall into that as well. So, you have to understand that we are pretty much godlike. If I went back to if I went back to the Middle Ages, they wouldn't have the same knowledge we have now. They knew about the world. They didn't know about the Americas. They didn't know about the solar system. We know a great deal. So if you compare us to maybe an older race, but then on the other side, the older race knew probably more than what we did. For example, there was such a thing called Bowles. It was Bowles' medical book. I forget the proper name, but it was written by a guy called Bowles. But there was Latin in there. There was Old English. There was all sorts of different languages. And even cures from Turkey. So essentially, the magicians and healers travelled around because there was all these Bald's Leech book. That's what it was called. They travelled around the known universe, and that proved that one, they travelled, and second, they knew lots and lots of languages. And thirdly, when you read Bald's Leech book, they also understood about microbes, but they didn't call them microbes as such. But the point what I'm trying to make to you is that we have access to so much intelligence, whereas these guys, they would probably have to spend most of their lives working on being intelligent, where we can just pick up the phone and sort of say, oh, what's the Hadron Collider? Poof, and it will tell you. Yeah? What's quantum entanglement? Bang, it will tell you. Yeah? I mean, for example, I was working on a highly complex mathematical formula to get the name of my guardian angel, and I gave it to a engineer, a mathematician, and a nuclear physicist. None of them could do it. Then I gave it to AI, and AI did it in seconds. They came up with the name of my guardian angel. Then I took the formula that it gave me, because I said I want you to formulise it, and I gave it to my friend, and he read the formula, and he says, "Yeah, that's the correct formula." So essentially, essentially they couldn't do it. Okay.
Of course, it's interesting. AI, the takeover is part of this. I know in Israel, the AI genociding the Palestinians is called the gospel, and there's a certain amount of antichrist activity going on right now. Certainly, stabbing people is definitely antichrist activity. I don't know if you've seen the movie 1984. Brian, with Richard Burton, and it's quite interesting. Now you've brought all this up about the collider, but it's when Richard Burton is torturing the John Hurt character, he says to him, basically, now we've taken over, man is extinct. And do you think that we're heading in that direction, or is there a way of solving what's going on?
Essentially, we're going into sort of techno-feudalism, aren't we?
Right.
Digital passports, face recognition, blah blah blah. Essentially, what will happen sooner or later, money will disappear, and you will have credits. Okay. The phone will be listening to you, everything that you say. You say something wrong, then essentially you'll lose credits. It will become the thought crime of 1984. I'm sorry for being so bleak, but you would have to be absolutely bloody stupid not to see this is happening already. Look at England. You are arresting people for thought crime.
Oh, totally. I know it's scary. I mean, is there any way out? I tend to think, great. Won't have to live in this place long, obviously I'm going to die soon. Is there a way out through the reincarnation, I suppose, getting out of the samsara circle? I mean, the whole place feels as if it's surrounded. This is how it feels to me.
Well, I mean, do you really think that dying relieves you from the misery of this planet?
Universe.
Well, no, this planet is called a prison planet. Quite simply, it's a prison planet. So
how did that start? The prison planet.
It as far as I can work out, it's attached to the Sufism, which must mean it's from Zoroastrianism, which means it must be from the ancient sort of Sumerian religions. So it goes right back, the prison planet thing. It's not a new invention. There is literally nothing new under the sun.
So did God create this planet to be a prison planet, or the human monkey made it so?
Well, it depends what you read. I mean, sort of like people talk about Sitchkin in his work, and they're always saying that it's misquoted. But since Sitchkin, other people have been translating the Sumerian tablets, and the Sumerian tablets pretty much say that aliens came down to Earth, got hold of the chimpanzees, hotted them up a bit, given them a bit of intelligence, got rid of the Earth, made them into slaves, and essentially, if you like, our gods are essentially aliens, according to the Sumerian tablets.
And so we're talking about the Anunnaki right now. Did the Anunnaki bugger off, and then are they coming back now? Is that what's happening, or were they always here? They're still here, and they're just as surprised as we are that things are changing.
Well, it's their planet, isn't it? So I'd imagine that once again that like they're probably still here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that they went away. Why should they? Yeah, maybe things went a little bit out of control because nature always finds a way. and perhaps the fact that they are now clamping down on human rights, etc., etc., I mean, shows two things: that it's very intelligently driven what's happening. You know, it's sort of like, obviously China was the model for the rest of the world. That's pretty obvious. The fact that all the nations followed the COVID narrative shows that all the nations are linked to the hip. So, you know, we're in a really, really bad way, and people, of course, are asleep.
What are their intentions for us? Do they want to? I know they want to wipe a lot of us out.
Yeah, they're going to. I mean, this was spoken about in the '60s. Aldous Huxley's brother, after his death, was at a meeting, and he said, "Oh, you know, no one's discussing the elephant in the room. That essentially eugenics is necessary for the human race." You know, it's sort of like,
what's eugenics? What's eugenics?
Well, essentially, if you don't meet the score, you get killed, or you get sterilized so you can't breed. This was going on in America right up to the end of the '60s. Essentially, if you were a repeated offender, you were sterilized. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is that, you know, those who write the news hide the history, but you can dig around and you can find this. You know, eugenics. I mean, if you want to know about eugenics, Bill Gates is a eugenicist. So is what's his name? Robert Johnson, the Prime Minister. He's another eugenicist. And
what does it actually mean that the weakest are going to get culled?
Well, yeah, I mean, essentially, we're just going to be treated like cattle, and many, many millions and millions of people are going to die. You know, what do you think the state injectable was about?
Not many people have died, though, of that.
Oh, you've read the wrong figures. You should be looking at the figures. Many, many people died.
Right.
And continue to die.
And they're going to bring in new viruses, so more of us die.
Of course. yeah, of course. That's what's going to happen.
And you believe this is Anunnaki control?
Well, I don't believe Anunnaki control. I believe that people at the top have sat down, like they did in World War I, like they did in World War II, like they do in Ukraine now, and they've decided they want the world to be like this, and they want a certain population, because they're the only people who can operate that sort of system.
Yes.
You know, like I said, you have to remember what Voltaire says: if you want to know who's in charge, see who you cannot upset.
Yeah.
Who you cannot criticize. And essentially, now you can't criticize anybody. If you criticize, like say, for example, if we look at Julian Assange, he criticized America for killing innocent people. He ended up in jail. No, there's no justice there. That's just how it is. And people have to really sober up and understand that the world that they knew has gone. And if they don't fight, if they don't object, if they go mealy-mouthed, they are just leading themselves to the slaughter, and that's what will happen to them. I mean, think about what's happening in England. The least voted Prime Minister has turned out to be an absolute tyrant. Nobody is baying for him to resign. Nobody. Nobody in Parliament.
It's weird. It's weird. When I look at Starmer, you can't see very much energy behind his eyes. He looks like a little boy. Have you seen that? Have you looked at his eyes? They're very... Look, you can tell that Mummy's telling him what to do. Or somebody, I don't know who it is, but
look, you have to understand, Chris, you have to understand that leaders are selected and not elected. It's as Stalin says. He says, I do not care who votes, but I do care who counts. Now, if that was in the 1940s, they've pretty much got the counting game off to a T. Yeah. How many times have polls been dramatically wrong? and somebody else has got in. And, you would have to be incredibly stupid not to understand that leaders are selected and not elected. And the fact that nobody is saying vote of no confidence to a prime minister that is taking people out of jail, dangerous people, to put in first-time offenders into jail to pacify his ego so that people don't talk about his system, which essentially is, well, it's Chinese.
Yeah. What do you think, as individuals, we should do? Should we,
as individuals, we can do nothing. We've never been able to do anything as nothing. Why do you think they invented feminism? Yeah, apart from the fact they wanted the money out of the women. Well, essentially, they wanted society splintered. Why have we got the woke? Because they want it more splintered. Why have we got far right? Because they want it more splintered. Yeah. The only time people are powerful is when they are joined together. You're old enough to remember the 70s. Remember in the 70s before Thatcher, literally anything that went off, there was massive demonstrations. Of course, now if you have a demonstration, it's now labelled as insurrection. Yeah, it's like Chomsky said, when democracy is under threat, language is changed. I'm sorry for being really doom and gloom, but that's why I don't live in England. It's gone to the dogs. In less than 18 months, you'll be the same as China. Believe me. Seriously. Already you're there, but most people in England haven't woken up to the fact that they are in China. They still think they're in England. They're not. Your rights have gone.
Do you think property ownership will go down the pan?
Well, who knows what the elites want, really? Yeah. I mean, the sad fact is the elites always want one thing, and that's power. Yeah. And if people understand that the people who control you only interest is in power, then why do you want to vote people in whose only drug is power? They're not thinking about the common good. They're not thinking about what's good for you or what's good for me. They're thinking about the bottom line and what's profitable,
but of course,
etc., etc.
If the control is higher than humanity, obviously anyone we vote in, there's no way out. There's no political way out then.
No, there's no political way out. I mean, essentially, you have a choice. You either move to somewhere where you're not involved in this garbage, yeah? You either play the game and hope if you're a good little boy or girl, then you live, yeah? I mean, the days of the French Revolution are over because, quite simply, look at the youth. The youth has no vigor, has no power, has no ever. There won't be a revolution because, quite simply, the ideology of revolution is not there. They'd rather be talking...
Do you think that the youth...
Sorry?
What were you going to say? They'd rather be talking about what?
Pronouns. Seriously.
Do you think that the youth has no vigor? My son was actually talking about testosterone has gone down. Apparently that,
Of course testosterone's gone down because of the pill. Yeah. The menstrual pill is indestructible. It goes into the water. And when men drink it, their testosterone goes down. Essentially the menstrual pill was invented in the Victorian times, and one of the clever Victorians pointed out, well, it's indestructible if you put it into the water, then essentially you are going to destroy everything. And so they decided not to go ahead with it. Then, of course, in the early 60s, they introduced the pill, understanding that once it gets into the water table, then essentially it will feminize men, and it will reduce the sperm count and it will reduce the population. Have you noticed how everything has the reduce the population stamp?
Yeah.
Nothing about being better people, nothing about being better human beings. This is all about reducing the population. It's quite interesting.
And do you think any race, any particular race on Earth is favored by the Anunnaki?
Like I said to you, you only have to ask yourself one simple question. If you can't criticize somebody, then they are in charge. Yeah?
Right.
It's that simple. I mean, you think of how many people now you cannot criticize. Yeah?
Do you think that every race has its own god? For instance, I was born I've Irish blood, apparently. Maybe a bit of English swirling around there. Do you think, say, the Irish and the basic English have a certain deity or a god that we're not praying to, that we probably could?
Okay, I don't want to really upset you, but every single god that you pray to, you were given. I mean, the easiest way to understand this is to understand the Soviet Union. Okay, before the Soviet Union, the sort of primordial Russia, there was no real fixed religion there, and the king got together, looked at all the religions like in a catalogue, and then decided for the Byzantine religion, and then told everybody, you're all, Orthodox Catholics, and they went, yee, we're all Orthodox Catholics, but the religion was selected for them. If you're
what about Odin? Odin, isn't he Nordic, a Nordic god?
I don't know a great deal about the early gods, but once again, you have to look at the nature of the gods, right? The Vikings invaded everywhere at first, until they realized it cost a lot more money than it was worth doing. So essentially their gods were like Thor and Odin. They were gods of war and gods of battle. Yeah. So, the people at the top said, look, if we're going to invade somebody, we need a superhero. And of course, the superhero was Thor. And so mothers told their children, oh, you're going to grow up like Thor. You're going to be a mighty warrior. The religion is very much the psychology of the nation. And of course, the psychology of the Western nations now is pronouns, individual sensibility, and being woke. So
totally.
That is your religion now, and that's your God now. Totally, if you want to isolate a God, that's there's your Trinity: wokeness, self-sensibility. Yeah, and I would say, on reflection, probably a very Marxism, in reality, Marx. Yeah.
But say if somebody wants to plug in spiritually, what would you advise them? Would you advise them to work with any particular entity?
Well, I mean, once again, you have to be very, very careful. I mean, the spiritual journey is an absolute bloody minefield. As you know, I spend 6 months of the year in India, and if people understood that religion essentially is a business, it's a business. Literally, you get people walking down the street saying, oh, do you want to meet Buddha? Here's a ticket, come to the thing tonight, you can meet Buddha. It's almost like going to a dance class. And so essentially you just meet people who want to make money because other people are absolutely ignorant as to what's going on. But
so what would you advise people to do?
What I advise people to do, I'd say, it's a bit boring, like Jesus Christ, love thy neighbour, join together, work as a whole, not as individuals, and understand that what Genghis Khan said, true freedom can only be taken. If somebody gives you something, it's not freedom. I mean, think about being a human being, right? Okay, you walk out the door, you pay tax when you buy something to eat. You go on the bus and you pay tax to go on the bus. You go on the tube, you pay tax to go on the tube. By the way, if you're paying for all this with your credit card, you're also paying commission, so you're paying another tax, yeah? You get to work, you earn money, you pay tax on it. Okay. You buy a house, you pay tax on it. You know, like the whole thing.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I've never felt free here. I've always hated it here. But I'm asking, where do we plug in spiritually to draw strength?
Well, to really get strength spiritually, you have to be one as a people. Realistically, that is true spirituality. I mean, we explained this before. If we look at Luciferianism, it's essentially some guy sat on his own, meditating, saying how wonderful we are, and then everybody else joins his group. They sell up their houses, etc., etc., and then move to this isolated place to sort of go towards the light. But realistically, the rest of the world is going to hell. So the real true spirituality to tune into is love one another, become whole as a group. And then that way you grow stronger. But at the moment we have so much fracturization and we have so many individual aspects to us that we're actually weakening ourselves all the time, and you can see the result of it. The result is those who are organized pick us to pieces, and the governments around the world, which are fairly vindictive and malicious, they're just picking their people to pieces. Because why? They're fractured. And this fracturing was deliberate. So realistically, the spirituality we should be tuning into is the one that Jesus spoke about, which essentially is love one another and be strong as a community. That's what you should be focusing in for. If you want individual spirituality, you've got to look for like Luciferianism or variations of it. You know, I mean, you know, Buddhism, whatever. They're all pretty much the same. You know, sort of. The Satanists and the Buddhists will be very angry for saying that, but essentially they all go to the light, and they all work with light, and they're all about the individual being enlightened. The deities are slightly different, but realistically they're fairly much the same. But to be a human is to be connected.
I've come across individuals like that, and it's not right because they don't give a shit about the world crumbling as long as they're rising, and it's despicable, isn't it? I just don't like it.
Well, it's not despicable, it's planned. You know, I mean that was the big thing of in Orwell's 1984. You know, he divided the people into gold, silver, and bronze, and a bronze couldn't talk to a silver, and a silver couldn't talk to a gold, etc., etc. The same thing will happen with the digitalization. Essentially, there will be zones that you can go into and zones that you cannot go into. You know, this will happen, and unfortunately, it will happen within my lifetime. I can almost see it happening now within England in the next 18 months. Seriously, I mean, this is what the 15-minute city is. The 15-minute city is essentially the plutonium, gold, silver, and bronze. Seriously, you know.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's so depressing, isn't it? I mean,
it's depressing if you're not clever enough to get out, it's going to be depressing. Yeah? You know.
So where are you suggesting we all go to Ukraine?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm suggesting is that there are, like, for example, if you go on YouTube, there's go where you're treated best. Yeah?
Russia.
Russia's opened its borders for people from England. Did you know that?
Even poor people from England?
Yeah, they've made it much easier for you to move to Russia. Essentially, Putin has literally done open borders for people in the West who want to move to Russia.
But you have to have funds, surely.
Well, yeah, you have to have money to do it to do anything, don't you, Chris? You know, but the point is that Russia, Putin has opened the doors. He said, if you're fed up of living the woke lifestyle, then come to Russia. But, if you go to Russia thinking it's going to be some kind of picnic party, then I would suggest you think again.
Why? What will happen in Russia?
Well, I mean, Russia's not as bad as the West, but it's certainly authoritarian. You know, sort of. But on saying that, I have friends at the beginning of the war. They left Russia, and the Russians said, "Why are you leaving?" And they said, "None of your business." And many of them, you know, the border guards just said, "Okay, fine." And then the ones who said, "None of your business," "Okay, just tell us why you're leaving." And they said, "Because you've gone into a war. I don't want to die for you." And they said, "Fair enough," and they walked out. I mean, there are thousands of Russians in India. There are thousands of Russians in like places like Montenegro. There are thousands of Russians in Bali. There are thousands of Russians in where was it? You know, the Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. You know, literally millions left Russia because of the war, and the Russians allowed them to do it. And you can't say that about all democracies. I don't think England would allow you to leave if there was a war. Seriously.
No, 100%, 100%. I notice we're coming to the end of studio time. And you've been a great guest, Brian. There's a lot for people to think about. Where can they get hold of you if they want to speak to you?
Mainly on YouTube. I'm on YouTube. They'll probably, or Facebook. They'll probably say, "You're really arrogant. We don't believe you." Blah blah blah. But unfortunately, I've been on this earth for about 64 years now.
Oh no, I loads of people have commented. You know, when I hang these shows, obviously on YouTube, and they go out live as well. People really like you.
Okay, cool. That's nice to know. But I'm sorry for a bit of a rant. But and we were supposed to be discussing the stabbing, but I think we did something.
I think we
better.
did. I feel enlightened. And I'm going to go away and think about all you've said. And my head definitely feels enlightened. So I think people will get a lot out of what you've shared.
Okay, brilliant. Well, you have a good night and namaste.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you very much, listeners, for listening. And see you again next week.
Bye.